Welcome back for a review of One Piece chapter 1042, and honestly this was an amazing chapter. All I'll say is
Vindication!
In my very first video, I presented a theory that as an Eastern Dragon, Kaido has been imbued by his mythical devil fruit with incredibly good fortune. In fact, for the past several months, I've been working on a video series exploring Kaido's origins and his devil fruit power in greater depth, the first part of which likely released just before this chapter review. As we'll discuss in a few minutes, I believe this chapter offers the best evidence to date in support of this theory, the smoking Kong rifle if you will. But before getting into the discussion, welcome if you're new to the channel. I do weekly One Piece chapter reviews, theory videos, and discussions. So if you're interested, please consider subscribing. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. So now getting into the discussion, the opening of the chapter was actually pretty surprising. We learned last week that Drake had followed CP0 into the castle, but we see here that he snuck up to stab the bowler hat wearing agent in the back. Bowler Hat seems genuinely shocked by what I guess you could call betrayal, if not for the fact that Drake was exposed by Who's Who and assaulted by Cypherpole. As detailed in the past, I think this suggests a deep division between Cypherpole and the Marine Intelligence Division Sword, which we may learn more about in the future. Despite seemingly sustaining some serious injuries, Bowler Hat is able to escape Drake's blade and counter with a Shigan to the neck, demonstrating just how much power he wields as one of CP0's elite agents. As I said last week, I believe he's a distinct character from the apparent leader of Cypherpole with whom Doflamingo met in the aftermath of the Marineford War, but he's nevertheless quite a formidable adversary. I've honestly been perplexed by his design from the moment he was first introduced on Dressrosa. What appeared at first to be a mask turned out to be his actual face. I can't fully explain the reason why, but his design reminds me of Akira Toriyama's self-portrait. Knowing now that we're seeing his actual face, I wonder if he might be a cyborg, enhanced by Dr. Vegapunk, evidenced by his eyes, one glowing and the other hollow and void. I know I'm getting a bit off track, but the asymmetry of his ocular region is also suggestive of the frequently used missing, scarred, or closed left eye motif seen throughout the series. I'm sure despite the brutality of Bowler Hat's attack, Drake isn't dead or even down for long, given that he hasn't yet had a major impact on this battle. As we'll discuss in a few moments, I even wonder if he could escort Luffy to safety in the wake of what appears to be another crushing defeat, though other options also remain on the table. And on that note, let's talk about the battle between Luffy and Kaido, which takes up the remainder of the chapter. Given that most of the pages in this week's chapter were focused on this fight, I won't bore you with a play-by-play recap of the action, but there were nevertheless a lot of interesting details to pull out from the scene. For quite a while, I felt that Luffy's battle with Kaido has lacked the same heightened emotions which fueled his encounters with major arc antagonists in the past. However, I considered this to be evidence of another impending inflection point rather than a deficiency in Oda's writing. It's a feature, not a flaw. Luffy and Kaido were clearly enjoying their battle, but Luffy's temper has finally started to run hot over the past few chapters. Conversely, Kaido's moods are many and likely reflect his diverse experiences during his storied life as a pirate, which I hope will soon be explored in coming chapters through a dedicated flashback. Importantly, as much as Kaido has acknowledged Luffy as a worthy adversary, we haven't yet seen him display in this battle the same deep-rooted emotions which bubbled to the surface during his earlier encounter with Yamato. This likely evidences the fact that Luffy has thus far been pushed much closer to the limits of his strength than has Kaido. All that is to say, I really enjoy how this battle is now progressing. Luffy and Kaido both see in each other a worthy opponent, and enjoy the thrill of battle, but there are very real stakes involved here. As Kaido said to Yamato, this isn't a game of make-believe, and life isn't a series of easy questions with simple answers. The Drunken Dragon Fist makes for quite an entertaining battle, but I suspect in the true final phase, Kaido will be fully sober and his mood will match Luffy's when he realizes his territory, his crew, his emperor status, and his true dream or ambition is really on the line and at risk of being shattered by the new generation rising to the top. Importantly, we learn that Luffy wasn't exaggerating last week when he said this would be his final barrage with Gear 4. He's truly at the limit of his strength and makes clear he's not holding anything back. Yet despite the fact that Kaido has sustained some serious damage, it's clear he's still faring much better than Luffy. Above all else, what this strongly indicates is that Luffy doesn't have any Gear 5 waiting in reserve. he says that if this assault doesn't work, he's going to lose, which means as far as he's presently aware, he has nothing left in the tank, no tricks left up his sleeve, or in other words, Luffy has placed his bet and played his hand. It's important to remember that although they came as a surprise to readers, Luffy made clear he had invented Gears 2 and 3 before his battles with Blue Wano and Lucci on Enies Lobby. Similarly, Gear 4 was something he developed during the time skip long before he tried it for the first time on panel against Doflamingo. Gear 5 would likely be something Luffy had already workshopped rather than something he invents on the spot, particularly when he's already completely drained of stamina. Which means, I believe this week's chapter takes Gear 5 off the table as a power-up option to defeat Kaido, despite any perceived hidden patterns you might see on Luffy's face, in the clouds, or on a slice of toast. I'll fully admit my bias in that I never really believed Gear 5 would be the solution for Luffy toppling Kaido. At this point, it seems there are only two possibilities remaining: Awakening, or my preferred solution, reliance on the 9 shadows from Toki's prophecy. So let's first address Awakening. There is of course a mystery, newly awakened devil fruit in play, which has caused quite a bit of stir among the 5 elders. Oda is clearly using the intentional ambiguity of the dialogue and clever misdirection to keep us guessing. I outlined in an earlier video why I believe Tama's Kibi Kibi fruit could be the power which compelled Zunisha's arrival and binds it to Momo's command, but the events of the past couple chapters have indeed strongly indicated the Gomu Gomu fruit could be the mysterious devil fruit the government tried to hide from the annals of history. That may very well be the case, and as such, its awakening could elevate Luffy to a new level of power and grant him his first decisive victory over an Emperor of the Sea. Perhaps further evidencing that outcome, Kaido says rubber shouldn't be able to alter trajectory mid-air as it does when Luffy uses his Snake Man form. Importantly, the mystery devil fruit feared by the 5 elders has been renamed to hide the true nature of its power, so Kaido's words could hint that Luffy isn't actually a rubber man. Which is exactly what I think Oda wants readers to believe. Like I said, I won't deny the possibility Luffy's fruit is the mystery power feared by the 5 elders, and that its awakening will reveal that he wields some power which goes far beyond the ability to stretch like rubber. But I also think it's a little too obvious. Oda's being just a bit too heavy-handed in the foreshadowing. Who's words to Jinbei about the Gomu Gomu fruit previously being held aboard a government ship, the order from the elders to execute Luffy immediately in order to prevent the worst case scenario, and now this hint from Kaido that Luffy's abilities are mislabeled. I think this is all an intentional misdirection on Oda's part. I won't argue that Luffy having such a mysterious and secret ability would make him overpowered or make him too special. The very first chapter made clear that the story of One Piece is Luffy's voyage of destiny. He's a bearer of the will of D, his treasured straw hat once belonged to the former Pirate King, and is apparently a hero's hat replica of a much larger version hidden away in Imu's vault. According to Yamato, his yet-to-be-revealed underlying dream was shared by Gold Roger. He was raised as a brother to Roger's son Ace, his grandfather is Garp, the hero of the Marines, his father is Dragon, the world's most dangerous criminal, he possesses 1 in a million Conqueror's Haki, and he hears the voice of all things. Not to mention, centuries-old prophecies have also foretold his eventual arrival and predict the impending impact of his ascendancy to the Pirate King's presently unoccupied throne. At this point, nearly everything about Luffy and his crew is special in some capacity, so I won't argue that the Gomu Gomu fruit being some rare treasure from the Void Century would be a bridge too far, or that it would make him too special. That's simply not the case. Luffy is already special. I also won't argue that it would make Luffy overpowered, because Oda has consistently demonstrated throughout the series he's capable of writing worthy adversaries for Luffy. Luffy needs to surpass all of the world's most powerful pirates to become the Pirate King, and as much as I believe we still have several hundred chapters remaining, it's undeniable the story is entering its final phase following Wano. Now would be the time, if any, to give Luffy such a dramatic power-up. So while I admit Luffy's fruit could be the newly awakened power which has captured the Elder's attention, renamed to be hidden from the pages of history, I still don't believe that to be the case, for 2 reasons. The first, when we take a step back, the pieces of the puzzle don't really fit. The Elders suggest this fruit was lost to the mists of time, but the Gomu Gomu fruit was in the world government's possession 12 years ago. They also are somehow aware this fruit has suddenly awakened after centuries of dormancy, which would be difficult to explain when it comes to Luffy. Though Bowler Hat has now arrived on the roof, no one from CP0 was previously directly monitoring Luffy's battle with Kaido, so barring the elders possessing some extrasensory ability to perceive the awakening of a devil fruit anywhere in the world, there's no one who would have been able to relay information to them suggesting Luffy's ability had suddenly awakened. Luffy has been on the world stage for quite a long time, and his abilities are well known. Nothing on panel has suggested any change in how Luffy is using his powers on Wano, which means as far as we've seen, there's no new on-panel evidence of awakening that could have come as such a shock to the Five Elders. Further, from what we've seen, Awakening doesn't produce brand new, tangentially related abilities. The awakened Paramethea powers used by Katakuri and Doflamingo extended beyond their hosts' bodies and altered or transformed the properties of their surrounding environment. Using Awakening, Kid was able to magnetize other objects and people, not just himself. In similar fashion, Law was able to attach his Sphere of Silence to Big Mom. In short, Awakening is an extension of a devil fruit's natural powers, not something completely unrelated. In that sense, it's easy to extrapolate that Luffy's abilities awakened would simply rubberize his surroundings. Awakening is not like Bankai and Bleach, or special Nen abilities in Hunter x Hunter, the explanations for which could hardly fit on modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Abilities in One Piece are largely uncomplicated. Law's Op-Op fruit is at the very limit of how far Oda's willing to push the boundaries on a single devil fruit, and even then, it's easy to see a cohesive theme to his powers. Some abilities, like Sugar's and Doflamingo's, have a wide range of applications, while others, like Wapol's, are sufficiently bizarre, but the balance of devil fruit powers are usually clear and concise, and I believe that's because they represent a manifestation of people's dreams. Anything man can imagine, brought to life in reality. That last point is a topic for another day, but I'll close this part of the discussion by reminding you of a question from the Volume 65 SBS. A reader asks why, in this world full of strong ability users, Oda chose to give Luffy a simple, and by comparison, seemingly weak ability to stretch like rubber. They ask how Luffy can compete with such superpowered antagonists using his relatively simple abilities. Oda's response is telling, as he says he intentionally chose to impart Luffy with the goofiest power he could imagine, because he wasn't interested in drawing a straightforward, cool, tough hero, especially for so many chapters. Indeed, even Zoro, the most stereotypically badass member of the crew, fights using the ridiculous technique of carrying a sword in his mouth. Oda says that no matter how serious and dark the story gets, Luffy's still stretching and inflating, which allows him to lighten the mood as needed. In short, Luffy's goofy Gomu Gomu powers aren't just a power set, they're integral to the very tone of the series, and I don't imagine that's something Oda's willing to change, particularly after so many years. Luffy has always been creative in how he uses his powers, and never has the Gomu Gomu fruit felt like a hindrance or a limitation. He stretches his abilities to their limit, and when and if Luffy does awaken, rubberizing his surroundings will likely grant him new techniques which are badass and goofy in equal measure, consistent with the tone Oda has established throughout the entire series. If anything, I think Kaido's words in this chapter might suggest Luffy has already been using a form of awakening ever since Whole Cake Island. Kaido says that Luffy's fists shouldn't be able to redirect mid-flight, which perhaps suggests he's actually bouncing them off the air. Perhaps he's rubberizing the atmosphere, much like the gentle villain in My Hero Academia, which would be a very natural extension of Luffy's abilities. Importantly, if this is in fact the case, it would also seemingly remove Awakening as a potential trump card for Luffy, now that he's seemingly been broken again, and also leaves the question of the mystery devil fruit still unanswered. Which brings us to the final scene in this week's chapter. Just as Luffy and Kaido square up for a final confrontation, which according to Luffy will use up the last of his remaining stamina, the bowler hat wearing agent from CP0 arrives on the scene and grabs Luffy's arm during the backswing, which prevents him from following through and leaves him wide open to be struck down by Kaido with full force. Critically, Kaido directly connects this scene to his earlier one-on-one battle against Kozuki Oden in chapter 970, which was similarly spoiled by uninvited outside interference. I have a full theory video on this topic, so I won't go into too much depth here, but I believe Kaido's devil fruit imparts him with incredibly good fortune, particularly in one-on-one battles. The frequent use of gambling motifs throughout this entire story saga and the particular wording of Kaido's introduction evidences this theory. But most importantly, we saw in chapter 970 that in the moment Kaido was perhaps closest to death, facing a truly worthy adversary in Kozuki Oden, fate or fortune intervened. Kaido's introduction presented us with an inherent contradiction, a mystery or riddle to be solved. He has been defeated 7 times as a pirate, yet is believed to be the world's strongest living creature. Importantly, the omniscient narrator doesn't confirm Kaido to actually be the world's strongest. The narrator tells us what people in the One Piece world believe to be true about Kaido. This contrasts with the manner in which Whitebeard was introduced. The narrator plainly describes him as the world's strongest man. To be clear, I'm not suggesting any artifice in the way Kaido has been depicted thus far. He's clearly the real deal. He's not failing upward like Buggy the Clown or stumbling into success on the battlefield, but when the chips are down, fortune favors Kaido. Accordingly, Kaido has never lost to a single opponent, explaining both his past defeats and the perception that he's stronger than any individual adversary. Yamato lingered on the phrase one-on-one in chapter 1012, reinforcing this sentiment, yet we now see a consistent pattern, that when Kaido approaches his limit, fate intervenes. You could call this good fortune favoring Kaido, or misfortune striking his opponents at inopportune moments, but either way, the effect remains the same. Perhaps this is the reason Oda didn't show us Luffy's loss in chapter 1013. So could this mean Kaido's fruit is the one the elders are so worried about awakening? It would seem strange since the mythical fish fruit was seemingly held on God Valley, but there could be much more to that story than has yet been revealed. It's possible the elders didn't know the fruit was kept on God Valley. That being said, Vegapunk did experiment on Kaido at the world government's behest, and he's one of the world's most prominent pirates, so it would be strange to describe his power as nothing but a legend and lost to the mists of time. Perhaps it's not Kaido alone, but the twin dragons, Kaido and Momo, which indicate this power has awakened. It would seem the spiral pattern on the surface of Devil Fruit is significant, and notably, based on the design revealed in One Piece Magazine 13, Kaido's fruit is unique, in that it has not 1, but 2 spiral stems, perhaps suggesting it contains not 1, but 2 souls, now both manifest in the world through Kaido and Momonosuke. Maybe the reason the elders wanted Luffy executed was to prevent the worst case scenario that Kaido would be pushed too far. If that's the case, then by interfering just before his moment of triumph, thus inciting Kaido's outrage, the government may have just caused the very disaster they were trying to prevent. Importantly, Luffy has seemingly been bested in combat by Kaido yet again. As said, he used up everything he had, and now it seems Kaido can issue his cry of victory. Yet just like in his battle against Oden, he's deprived of the satisfaction because his victory was allowed through outside intervention. I suspect his rage will soon be turned toward Bowler Hat, just as it was toward Higurushi in the past. But if Awakening and Gear 5 are indeed off the table for Luffy, as I've suggested, then how can he rise to claim victory? This is a question I'll soon explore in depth, but I believe the answer lies in the 9 shadows of Toki's prophecy, which, in keeping with the dreams written by the people of Wano on the paper lanterns now rising toward the heavens, will accompany Luffy in mortal, shadow, or even spectral form to help bring Wano's dream to life and reopen its borders as the final act approaches. That's all for this week's chapter review. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing, and remember to hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.